tonight for this very special 3T in Town Hall with Chargé Tremont from the U.S. Embassy. It's really exciting to see all the faces. I haven't seen a lot of these faces for a long time now. So before we get into the town hall, I just want to go over a few things. The agenda for tonight starts with the town hall, which will be moderated by David Landis, a current member of the board. After the town hall is over, we'll transition into our monthly 3T mingle. The town hall will be live streamed over YouTube, and that live stream will stop once the town hall's over. So with that, I'll turn it over to David.
Great. Thanks so much, Jerry. Again, welcome everyone to tonight's town hall. I am, just a quick word about myself. I'm originally from Minnesota. I currently work at Tail, which is a content marketing agency based here in Stockholm. And previously, I worked at the local, and early in my career, had a short stint at the U.S. Embassy as a local employee, which makes it extra fun to be able to welcome our special guest speaker tonight, Chargé d'Affaires Pamela Tremont. Chargé Tremont arrived in Sweden in April 2019. She served as Chargé until November. And then during the tenure of Ambassador Ken Howery, she served as Deputy Chief of Mission before resuming her role as Chargé when President Biden assumed office on January 20th, 2021. She has been a career diplomat, and her CV is sort of like a world map in and of itself. She has served in the Ukraine, Cyprus, Zambia, UK, Turkey, Mauritius, and Canada, and of course, spent time in Washington as the State Department's Deputy Director of NATO Policy. She has a bachelor's degree from Baylor University and a master's in National Security Resource Strategy from the National Defense University. So we are very happy to have her with us tonight. And with that, I turn things over to you, Chargé Tremont.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for inviting me, and David for that kind introduction. I don't get to spend as much time with the American community here in Sweden as I would really like to. We usually work very hard with the Swedes to accomplish our goals. So it's great to be here tonight. I'd also like to thank Greg Elrod for serving as the embassy's representative to the club. We couldn't ask for a better representative, I'm sure you would agree. So I'm looking forward to meeting you all in person someday soon, but in the meantime, we'll have to make do with Zoom and YouTube. At least we all have a lot of experience with these platforms now, although I can't completely discount that there might be technical glitches on my end or a dog running in or something like that. But anyway, in all seriousness, as the honorary president of the American Club of Sweden, I'm delighted to be able to speak to you all, the club's members, as well as the American Women's Club and the American Chamber of Commerce this afternoon about the U.S. Embassy, my role, and the U.S. government's priorities in Sweden. First of all, I'm happy to report the U.S. Embassy is working hard for the American people to strengthen U.S.-Swedish ties. As you may have noticed, last month we marked 203 years of U.S.-Swedish diplomatic relations, and I would argue that our relationship has never been stronger. The embassy is forging ahead despite current conditions. We are thankful summer is coming and that there is light at the end of the tunnel regarding the pandemic. We made it through the last 14 months without losing any staff to COVID-19, but I know many others have lost family and friends. So if you are one of those people, I send my deepest condolences. As you may have read in the press, most of us, the Americans and the local staff, are now fully vaccinated, which allows us to more safely mingle with our counterparts so that we may safely advance US goals in Sweden. That includes meeting Swedish counterparts, while taking appropriate precautions, hosting events, things like that. Of course, we follow all local guidelines as well, but we're optimistic that better days lie ahead and that they're coming soon. I'm also glad to report that the it's almost 2 years now, project to renovate the U.S. Embassy building is nearing completion. After 67 years, the plumbing was desperately in need of an upgrade. Unfortunately, we can't dispense with the fencing or the other security measures. and not much has been done cosmetically, but we hope you'll notice slight improvements soon. Last year, the ambassador's residence was added to the Secretary of State's Register for Culturally Significant Property, so it will continue serving as a symbol of our deep and historical relationship. Speaking of ambassadors, I think you all know Ambassador Howery departed Sweden after January 20th, which is customary for political appointees. I don't know yet who will succeed him, but typically it takes 9 to 10 months after inauguration for the new ambassador to arrive. But with nobody announced for any embassies in Europe, I think it might take a little bit longer this time. I expect we'll probably see somebody before the end of the calendar year. And whoever it is, I know they'll be very lucky and consider themselves very lucky to be the US representative in Sweden. In the meantime, President Biden has thousands of political appointments to make, and many of them require Senate confirmation, which is one of the reasons it takes so long for us to get an ambassador to Sweden. While keeping his focus on fighting the pandemic, he's moving deliberately to fill positions in the new administration with people who have outstanding skills and deep experience. And he's building a very strong team. Secretary of State Tony Blinken has been in place since January. Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman and Undersecretary for Political Affairs Toria Nuland, the number 3 position in the State Department, are in place. And they've announced, but not confirmed yet, Karen Donfried to be the next Assistant Secretary for European Affairs. That's the bureau that our embassy answers to, so that's important for us. But she hasn't had her confirmation hearings yet. So until the new ambassador arrives, except for a small gap this summer while I take some leave, I'll continue to serve as the Chargé d'Affaires. As David said, I think, Jerry, one of the two, said, I was Chargé when I first got here and became so again back in January when Ambassador Howery left. As CDA, as we abbreviate it, CDA, it's a privilege to lead the US Embassy in Sweden in deepening our relationship with Sweden on a whole range of issues, from defense and security and trade and investment to climate change and cultural exchanges. So I'm very pleased that all that has happened in spite of the challenges posed by the pandemic. As DCM, my role is to support the ambassador as his chief operations officer and advise him on how to build an even stronger Swedish relationship. So the two positions are very much similar. Before I wrap up, I'd like to speak a little bit about the Biden administration's priorities, which are, of course, the embassy's priorities here with our relationship with Sweden. Our top US goal at any US embassy in any administration is the protection of American citizens. You probably saw last year how our consular colleagues repatriated over 100,000 Americans stranded overseas when the pandemic struck. Fortunately, that wasn't necessary in Sweden. We still had flights, but it was commercial flights, I should say, but it was a truly unprecedented effort. That doesn't mean we can spring Americans from jail or cure illnesses or force your teenager to talk to you or provide you a security detail, but we do whatever is allowed within the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. On the foreign policy front, President Biden has emphasized that America's alliances are our greatest asset in confronting threats, whether they be Russian aggression, cyber attacks, organized crime, migration, or a pandemic. And by leading with diplomacy, we must engage our adversaries to advance the security of the American people. He has also noted that every action we take in our conduct must be taken with the American working family in mind. So advancing a foreign policy for the middle class demands an urgent focus on our domestic economic renewal. And that's something we take very seriously at Embassy Stockholm. The president's top policy priority is combating the pandemic at home and abroad. To do so, we rejoined the World Health Organization and announced a $4 billion contribution to support the purchase and delivery of safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines via the COVAX facility. And I would note that Sweden is also one of the world's leading contributors to COVAX, the highest contributor on a per capita basis. Now that vaccines are generally available to the public in the United States, he recently announced a donation of 80 million doses to other countries in need. President Biden has also committed to redoubling our efforts to confront climate change, as evidenced by his decision to rejoin the Paris Agreement and host a Leaders Summit on Climate, where we announced our intention to join the Leader Group for Industry Transition, or LEAD IT, an initiative started by Sweden and India to reduce carbon emissions in heavy industry. Likewise, he plans to host a democracy summit late this year or early next year to discuss with other countries that are like-minded, like Sweden, how to protect our way of life and promote human rights around the world. The president has also stressed that his administration is clear-eyed about the threats posed by Russia and China. He's already imposed sanctions on both those countries in coordination with allies and partners, but he's prepared to engage with them when it is in the US interest, such as he is doing this week in Reykjavik at the Arctic Council, where Secretary Blinken has met Foreign Minister Lavrov, and on other issues such as climate change and disarmament. He plans to do all this by rebuilding alliances and partnerships. His first trips abroad will be to the G7 and NATO summits in June in London and Brussels. In the meantime, he's been in frequent contact with world leaders, including at the EU, and is engaged with the UN. Many administration officials have already spoken to their Swedish counterparts on the phone. It's important to remember that President Biden himself is no stranger to Sweden. As a US Senator from Delaware, he had many opportunities to become familiar with Sweden's 17th century colony near modern-day Wilmington and Sweden today. In fact, he visited Sweden in August 2016 as vice president and met Prime Minister Löfven and then Foreign Minister Wallström. When we talk about the United States and Sweden being strong partners, it's no exaggeration to say that that partnership starts at the very top. And with that, I hope I've left some time for questions, David.
Thank you so much. Great to get such a wide-ranging look at the embassy's priorities in your work there. We have, as is customary with the town hall format, we have a number of questions that we solicited from different members of the American Club in the run-up to this event. And just to sort of facilitate and minimize any technical glitches, we decided easiest for me to kind of relay those questions to you. So I have a long list, and we'll see what we get to. But I think just to start off, there's a question from one of our members. His name is Bill, who wanted to know what you hope to accomplish during your assignment in Sweden. You have, I guess, about 2 years left. Yeah, what have you done so far, and that you're proud of, and what do you want to do in the next 2 years?
Well, I've been here 2 years and I have 1 year left. So my time for accomplishing new things is dwindling, but it is really hard to pick out a particular thing that I can take credit for, because pretty much everything we do is such a whole of embassy effort. I guess I'm really pleased the embassy has been a catalyst in recent years in helping the Swedish government think more broadly about the threats posed by the People's Republic of China, and in appreciating the security aspects of the Arctic, while further opening discussions about how we can address those challenges together. I'm really proud that we took steps to protect our team during the pandemic and adapted our efforts to teleworking pretty successfully. And I'm proud of the role I played in selecting a really excellent team of diplomats, one of the finest groups of people I've worked with in my 30 years in the State Department. And none of this would have been possible. None of these accomplishments would have been possible without their diligence, creativity, and camaraderie. So I have about a year left, and I hope that we can continue to strengthen the US-Swedish relationship in some of the key areas that are new focuses for the new administration, and particularly climate change, human rights, and democracy come to mind. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
Great, thanks. I only 1 year left. I didn't realize it. Time flies.
It really does.
we have a number of questions touching on visa questions and visa issues, and it's complicated for a number of reasons. So I thought I would sort of kind of ask you kind of broadly for people who are wondering when consular services might get sort of ramped up again, and sort of what people on the outside may be able to do, especially those, I think, who maybe are struggling with some of the online accessibility issues. And so I leave it to you. I just a lot of questions that related to that issue.
Yeah, it's kind of the elephant in the room of every conversation, I'm afraid. So let me just sort of paint a picture for you. We have a number of issues that have sort of come together to create this problem that we're having. First of all, the pandemic required that we completely shut down consular services for a number of months. And then there are the presidential proclamations that President Trump put in place and that President Biden has extended that prevent people from Schengen and other countries from traveling to the US, or people who've been present in those areas for the previous 14 days. So the first problem that people mostly are having is that they can't get appointments for visas, including student visas and so on, at the embassy. And that's because we have such a backlog of consular services from the shutdown and other things for American citizen services, namely passports and reports of birth abroad, that we simply don't have enough appointments for everybody. The State Department has mandated that we have to take care of those American citizens first. We have almost a 2-month wait time to get a US passport, to get an appointment, to apply for a US passport. And that doesn't include our mail-in applications, which some people are eligible for. So the State Department will not allow us to issue routine non-immigrant visas until we clear that backlog. With the 8-person cap on our that the Swedish government imposes on people inside a room, that creates a problem in how many appointments we can accept per day at any given time at the embassy. In addition, we have summer coming up, and as you know, under Swedish labor law, people go on leave, and there's not a lot we can do about that. So we have limited staffing in the summer, just like everybody else does in Sweden. So even that we see now that the COVID numbers are getting better, and the per capita limits on how many people might be allowed in the waiting room might rise, we're going to start losing people to family leave and summer vacations and so on. So unfortunately, I don't expect the availability of routine visa appointments to occur this summer. And so we are encouraging people who are planning to study in the US this year to start exploring other options, so that they're not under the impression that they're going to be able to slide in at the last minute, because at the moment that looks incredibly unlikely. As far as the presidential proclamations, President Biden has not indicated a willingness to lift those anytime soon. It could occur very suddenly. He doesn't ask me about these things or consult me, ask my opinion. But he did recently expand the prohibition on people from certain countries going into the US to include India because of the outbreak there. So it seems that given his focus on fighting COVID and his extension of the presidential proclamations, he considers this an important tool in fighting COVID, and I don't see him reversing that decision anytime in the immediate future, but we could all be surprised, who knows. As far as the online problems, I would just say that we use a contractor to take those appointments called GSS, and they are the ones that answer most of the questions. We pay them to do that because we simply don't have the staff to answer every email and question that all of our applicants have. We definitely wouldn't be able to do any appointments if all we did was man the phones. So I would encourage people to find as much of the information as they can on the embassy website. There is a ton of consular information there. We keep it very updated. And if you still can't navigate that, there is a chat feature on the application website where GSS should be able to help you with any technical problems. Does that answer most of the consular questions?
I think you covered most of what we had. I think you're preaching, as I think has been common during the pandemic, patience. a little bit of planning ahead, although, it sounds like it was a bit of a sort of a perfect storm of challenges for you to be staffed at normal levels. I've been on the counselor website myself. I know there's a whole lot of information out there, which sometimes in itself becomes a bit of a challenge to navigate. But I think your message is a good one, that people should really take a little time and see what they can find out, and just understand that this is the kind of the aftershocks of what has been an unprecedented sort of burden on you and your staff.
No, that's absolutely true. And I appreciate your empathy. It's, I know it's really frustrating because people who live in Sweden are so accustomed to be able to go kind of everywhere they want to. That's just the world that we've all grown up in. But we're just living in unusual times, and we're doing the best that we can with the resources that we have. And I'm hoping that we'll start to see some sort of normalcy in the fall. But until we can clear that backlog of passports, and then immigrant visas, before we get to non-immigrant visas, Washington just won't allow us to issue more visas than that. There are a few embassies in Europe that have slightly different staffing situations than we do, and are taking a few customers, applicants from outside those countries. I can't direct anybody to any of them, but people can explore other embassies' websites and see if there are appointments available in other countries.
Okay, great. One, I guess, sort of related question, and this comes from another one of our members named Beth, and is whether you have any indications about if the U.S. will be issuing some kind of COVID vaccine passport at any time.
We don't have information on that, unfortunately. I would love that personally. At the moment, the only thing the US requires is a negative COVID test. And it can be a PCR test, which is, the one that takes 24 hours or something, or the 15-minute antigen test. So that's the only thing that's required to enter the US at the moment. We'll see if the vaccination situation changes that. It could, especially with the EU changing that. I don't know if it will have influence or not, but that might make things a little bit easier.
Okay. And just a quick follow-up, this testing, is that requirement for both US citizens and non-US citizens?
Yes.
Okay, good to know.
So unlike Sweden, which can't require its citizens to take a test to get in, Sweden will test you when you arrive at the airport, as I understand it. The US government is sort of expecting the airlines to enforce the rule that every passenger has to have a negative test to board the plane.
Good. Well, time is rushing along here, I see, but I wanted to be able to get into another area. You spend a lot of time talking about U.S.-Swedish relations and policy matters. So emphasizing again the strength of that relationship. And I think what would be interesting to know is how, in your time, how you see that the incoming administration, how priorities have changed, and what are likely to be some of the significant developments and major milestones in that relationship over the next few years. This is a question from one of our members, Alex.
Yeah, I think the situation has, to be honest, I think even in the Trump years, even though there was a lot of criticism and a lot of dissatisfaction with the Trump administration here in Sweden, that's what polls show. That's not my opinion, but the relationship actually progressed quite healthily. We strengthened and deepened the relationship on a lot of different fronts, especially defense, crime cooperation, in countering crime, trade, all sorts of things. And especially things like confronting global threats like China and Russia. But I do think there are new areas that we're looking at in the new administration. Obviously, President Biden's embrace of the importance of mitigating climate change is a huge area of cooperation where Sweden has, a real comparative advantage, so we can cooperate quite closely on that. Democracy is another one. Sweden currently has its own drive for democracy. And President Biden, as I said earlier, is planning on hosting a democracy summit. His view is that, democracy is sort of the foundation of our systems to fight authoritarianism, which is on a worldwide march. And we have to work together with our democratic allies and partners to push back on that and to prove that the democratic systems work, because the authoritarians would like to show that they don't. So I think those are areas where we will have a lot more cooperation, or even more cooperation with Sweden over the next 4 years. For the remainder of this year, Sweden is still the OSCE chairperson in office of the OSCE, which is a very important organization in upholding human rights in Europe and also security issues. It's one of the main players in trying to resolve the Ukraine conflict. It is playing a huge role in the Belarus crisis after the illegitimate elections there, and it's trying to solve frozen conflicts in Armenia, Azerbaijan, Moldova, and even Georgia. So we're working very closely with Foreign Minister Linda and her team to take full advantage of Sweden's chairpersonship in office of the OSCE. So yeah, lots going on. And I think the Malmo conference in October will be a big one. Prime Minister Löfven has made it very clear that that is one of his signature initiatives in countering anti-Semitism in Europe. So we're hoping to see a strong delegation from Washington participate in that, because it is an issue that we are very like-minded on as well.
Great, wonderful. And then just one last question. Maybe the toughest question of the day here. If you were to recommend one place in Stockholm that someone should see based on your time here, what would it be?
Oh, wow. That is a tough one. Let me think. Well, I live on Djurgården, and so I have, a pretty ideal location in terms of being close to the city, but also surrounded by nature and, being able to see the water and the wildlife and the parks and trails every day. So I have to say I have a special place in my heart for Djurgården. Of course, Skansen is really special. I love to go there and see the traditional structures as well as the wildlife that we don't always see in central Stockholm. But Gamlestan is really amazing as well, just seeing that historical part of town. I don't know that I could identify one single point. What would you say is your favorite and most recommended spot?
That's why I love asking the question. It's impossible to give an answer. And I mean, I have been in Stockholm for quite some time, and I think your answer sort of exemplifies that Stockholm, no matter where you go, there's something worth seeing, and that's what makes living here kind of a magical experience. So, but every once in a while, someone picks out a sort of a little corner that they like. My personal sort of favorite corner is a park where I spent a lot of time when I was on parental leave with my youngest son, Vasa Parken up in Vasastan. And I don't know, there you get a nice combination. It's of sort of nature, accessibility, and the wonderful sort of cityscape of Stockholm. So I think with that, we'll leave it. Thank you very, very much for your openness and willingness to be with us this night. I am going to now hand things over back to Jerry for the pinning ceremony. So Jerry, over to you.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Pam, for joining us tonight. I have to say, I live right on the other side of Djurgården, so I know how beautiful it can be.
Stop by for coffee sometime.
Yeah, I sure will. So the American Club has had a long-standing tradition of close relations with the U.S. Embassy. We traditionally have a representative, as you mentioned earlier, Greg, sitting on our board. And it's written into the bylaws that the club may elect as its honorary president the Chargé d'Affaires in the absence of a sitting ambassador. We elected you at a board meeting back in February, and that was you've been really an active part of the club since from the beginning that you got here. I remember the AGM, the last AGM, that we were actually able to meet in person. You spoke at that. So
at
it was
the Boston Museum.
Yeah, exactly. It was. So it was a really easy decision by the board to elect you as its honorary member. And in March, you accepted that nomination and accepted to be here with us tonight. It's tradition that we present our honorary president with a club pin at an event such as tonight's town hall. Generally, that's been in person, but due to the pandemic, we mailed the pin to you. I think you have the pin with you. Yes, right there.
I do.
So with that, and on behalf of the board of directors and the members of the American Club of Sweden, I want to express our gratitude to you, Pam, for serving as our honorary presidents. And I would like to present you virtually with the club pin.
Thank you so much, Jerry. It's definitely the easiest campaign ever. I appreciate you making this role really easy. And like I said, it's always nice to speak to the Americans and the people who support the U.S.-Swedish relationship in Sweden, because we often speak to the Swedish government, but sometimes our only interaction with the American population is through our consular section, which is a little bit more transactional. So it's nice to be somewhat social tonight.
Yeah. Great. Well, I just wanted to thank you again, Pam, for joining us tonight and telling us a bit about what's going on with the embassy. With that, I'm going to officially close the town hall and open up the mingle portion of our 3T tonight. And at this time, the YouTube live will end as well. So thank you all for joining us. And now we can mingle.
Thank you, Jerry.